Hey kids, welcome to Stylus Rambled Drawing Time thing. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about character rotations and getting that orthographic view you need to rotate your character. So this is the character I'm going to use for my short film that I've been working on, and it's not done yet. I've got the main body and the head done, so I could start doing some rigging stuff with that in the near future. I'm in the process of getting the hair rotated. I kind of made a design that I'm kicking myself for, but I really want to have really elaborate fairy hair, so here we go. I'm rotating this monstrosity. But I just want to share some of the tips I've learned along the way that can help you guys get your super smooth rotation, because the better your rotation is... Let's turn off that hair. She looks kind of good bald. I might kind of like her bald. But the smoother your rotation is, the better your rig is going to rotate, and the better your animation is going to look. You won't get weird bubbles and balls and stuff. And the whole reason you rig a character in the first place is so you don't have to deal with that stuff. So you can eliminate that process. So you want to spend as much time as you need to make sure your rig is super pristine and that your rotation is on point, or why bother? You're just going to get some boily mess like my original short film. Which was... So I did the initial rotation of this character in Photoshop. I didn't finish it off. My current mood is Photoshop for sketching. Sometimes I sketch in toonboom. They have really good drawing tools. The vector tools are really good for sketching or doing roughs, but I was just feeling Photoshop. I've liked working on a ginormous canvas, and I've got all the new cowl brushes that came with CC, so I like those. But some of the things you want to think about when you're doing turnaround are very simple, but they're going to pay off huge. So one thing that novices do when they're rotating a character is they just make sure they make these guidelines too fat. That might seem a little bit silly, like fat guidelines are going to be a problem, but let me show you why that's a problem. So if you're using toonboom, you're going to just want to use your line tool over here. Hold shift, and you can do all these beautiful lines across. So you want to make sure you've got them all along your major points like this. And then as you go along, you can add in finer ones. We'll get into that in a little second. So this one here, let's make this one 9 thickness. And say we just need to make a little circle. We'll do it in a different color just so it's visible. Purple's nice. So we make our little circle. So if you're looking at it from here, your circle's fine. It's like, it's within the lines. But with these big fatty lines, where is your circle touching? Is it touching the top of the line, or is it touching the bottom of the line? This one's halfway in the middle, and this one's like halfway up here. But you want to make sure, if you're going to rotate this, your points here are touching the line. So obviously you draw your circle first, and then you create these guidelines. Now when I rotate my character, copy paste, I'm just going to hold shift and over to bring it over, and I'm holding alt now so that my circle squishes from the center. But these things are going to line up perfectly. And this is, I'm zoomed right in on a vector image, so it's super precise. But when you're doing this in a pencil and you've got these fat pencil lines, this is what happens. You get the thing where half of it, this say is touching the bottom of the line, this is halfway up the center line, and then this one is inside the lines, it's touching the other ones. And so when we put them on two separate frames and then we animate them, we get this. We get a boil. And when you zoom out, it'll just be like, see, she's freaking out right now. But this is clearly changing size vertically. It's doing this. If it's only off a little bit, but everything's off a little bit, it'll look wrong. But if you're really tight on your rotation, so as you can see here, I'm using pretty fine lines. The bottom of my nose is touching the line, the chin is touching the line, and even if I'm halfway up or down the line, because it's so thin, you're not going to notice a difference. So you don't have to be as super precise. So once we've finished our rotation, if we're really tight on things, we can watch it as it rotates here, make sure nothing's boiling. There is some little issues here on the shoulders, which I would fix before I went on to rig this. But you want to be really precise with the line thickness so that you can nail everything down as much as possible. The next thing novices do is they don't count details, or they just omit details. So here our character's necklace has 2 pieces and then 1 piece. When you see the characters done up in their horizontal lineup, When you see the characters lined up across the board like this, it's a little easier to see when you actually rotate your character. But when they're laid out, it's not unusual at all for the character to have 3 buttons here, boop, 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 and then 2 buttons here, and then 3 buttons again. This one's lower. This one's, there's 2, so it can't possibly be lined up. Little details like that often don't get the respect they deserve. And they get overlooked. So always when you're rotating your character, make a note of details. So here, the flowers on the left side of her head, you have to figure out if it's symmetrical. In this case, it is. So these flowers do belong on both sides. But if it's a character that's asymmetrical and it's not meant to have flowers on both sides, you have to make sure that these flowers don't end up where they don't belong. These little loopies, you have to make sure they're right size and shape and perspective. These little armband things, you have to make sure that the thickness is maintained. That's another thing I see all the time when characters are rotated. Here, she has 2 little narrow bands on her wrist, this part here. But often you'll see this stuff rotated and it'll be 1 thick piece, or it'll be like this and it won't be the long narrow box anymore. It'll be thicker. So even these little details here, you want to put little guidelines. And I like to start, you can see I've got a lot of junk lines in here that I just kind of flatten down onto the layer. But I'll start with the biggest lines first and make sure my major shapes are rotating, and then I'll work down the tiny shapes. And with digital, you can just add as many layers as you need to. In traditional, if your stuff starts to get really muddy because there's too many lines, what you need to do is get a new piece of paper in your light box and trace your character over cleanly, and then go in and work your details. Don't be afraid to use 5 or 6 pieces of paper to get your thing super pristine if you're going to bring that in somewhere and rig it or get it cleaned. Other things, if you have an asymmetrical character, you want to make sure that the big hair floopy and this hair floopy line up. Make sure that they're on the same side, because this, you can't just flip this character for that reason. But there's lots of ways you can be economical by stealing the characters. So if you have your 3/4 front character and you need this one, but they're asymmetrical, you can still copy it, flip it, and then hold your shift and slide it along so that it's in the right place. And then you just erase out the details that don't work. So we know that her flowers are symmetrical. These guys here, I'm not going to bother doing asymmetrical flowers, or maybe I might muck around with the leaves or something. But all this stuff can be taken off here. The rest of your character is working fine. You can keep all this stuff. You just have to clean it up and then put in the details. This hair here, you have to match. Clean up your little bits. You can be as careful as you need to. This stuff's all symmetrical. This part here is not. So make sure that you're flipping this here to the other side. Because it's orthographic, you can just boop, 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 and then cut this out. Obviously maintain your line thickness. I'm just giving you guys demonstrations, so I want to be super visible. Right? And then check to see if anything else can't be flipped. When you first start, it can help to make yourself a little list. So say hair is not symmetrical, but like a star, whatever you need to remember. Pick down through and see if she has any decorative, like little jewelry. Down here we've got her wand. That's not symmetrical. So every time you make a new version or whatever, you can check this and see. If you know that the wand, for example, is on her left leg, you can put LL. Let yourself know it's on the left leg. Just because writing it down will help you remember, even if you don't have to refer back to this, just keep reiterating the stuff in your brain so it doesn't get lost. Whenever I get a resume and it says attention to detail, that's an excuse for me to go digging through this person's work to see that their details are on point. So you be careful. If you say you got attention to detail, you better have attention to detail, bro. So here's another good place where you can cheat. You've got your 3/4 front. You need your 3/4 back. So you have to think about the hair. That's actually reversed. That should be that way. Okay, so when you're looking at 3/4 back, you want to think about the things that are asymmetrical. So in this case, the hair is going to be flipped around, because think about how it's rotating around. And if you have to, just put your pen here and say, okay, if this rotates around now, so I'm looking at it from the back, where is it? Or get a friend to do it if you're not good at spatial awareness in your own brain. So we've already got our 3/4 front character done. if we need this 3/4 back, what we can do is take the character and then think about those details. So I'm going to copy and paste, and this time I'm going to paste into place. So if you're in Photoshop, you can edit, paste special, and paste into place, Control-Shift-V, and that'll paste it directly into where it needs to be. Hit Control-T to flip it, flip, and now I'm going to hold Shift and slide it along. Boop, boop. So now we've got our 3/4 front character. What we need is our 3/4 back. So what we need to do is just take out all the stuff that we don't need. So this inside stuff, we don't need that, but the silhouette will remain. So this hair silhouette, that's correct. The only thing that's different, let me switch to different color. So the only thing that's different is the ordering. So here, the face is going to come in front of the hair, and then this back hair here is going to come in front of the hair that we have in the back already. So it's just reversing the ordering of everything here. So we delete the inside stuff and fill in our details, whatever we need to fill that in. And then if you're doing a rough, don't be afraid to throw in extra colors and let yourself know, okay, this is that extra curl here. That's that other piece that we need to keep track of. All right, so then we can think about, we need the backs of the ears in there. So we'll use our other ear here to figure out where our ear needs to be. Fill that in, get our details, the back details, all that stuff, and then get rid of this. All right, so you take whatever existing information you have that you can use to fill this in, and the rest you add on top. So hopefully that makes sense. Here, the necklace needs to be flipped. So we need the back of that. Instead of this part, we need the back of the dress, which comes down like this. The arm goes in front. You're gonna be a little more meticulous about your details than this, obviously, but if you're just working at your rough doop-a-doop, you want to flip the feet around so that the correct leg is in the front, and the correct one has the wand case, and then erase that. All right, so now you can see without too much difficulty, obviously be a little more careful about your leveling and stuff, making sure that your scale is working, things like that, but it's saving tons of time from trying to measure out like her shoulder span, making sure her shoulder's the right width, making sure her arms are the same length, making sure her elbows line up, all that stuff. It's already done. Don't do it twice. That's crazy. Make sure she has hands that are facing the right way so she doesn't have crazy backwards hands. There we go. We've got a 3/4 back view with almost no work. Yeah, so much simpler. Same thing with front and back. You don't need to do front and back from scratch. You do the front view, make sure it's got arms, and then you can just mirror it to the back view. You can just erase her face, replace it with the back of her head, whatever has to go there, her bun. Boop, boop, this stuff all needs to go. Oh, you're looking at the back, because the silhouette is exactly the same. You just have to flip everything around. The back of the boots. I'm not happy with these boots. If you have some cute soft leather fairy boots reference kicking around, I still haven't really nailed that boot down. There you go. Now she's got a back view without remeasuring the widths of everything. Make sure you do measure the width of things. Make sure they're working well so that this the actual forms are rotating, things like that. Let me think. Oh, also little details like eyes. If you have your front eye done like this, and you need a 3/4, what you can do is copy, paste in place, and slide it over. And then you want to change the perspective of it a little bit. So you can just narrow it down. So instead of redoing everything to 3/4 view, you just shrink it down a little bit so it's slightly narrower. That works super well here, where you can just take the eye and change the width of it a little bit to make sure that things are working there. This, like, especially if you're using vector, because these things are in pieces, like the ear, that's another place where you can copy and paste. Just adjust your perspective on all your little details, like the earrings. There's no reason to draw these over and over again. That's crazy. Just Just squish them a little bit, get your perspective. If your line thickness has to be fixed, then fix it. Here I've got things grouped. If you are using Harmony, if you have a bunch of drawings, boop, 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 like this, for whatever reason, if you want them to be connected, especially if you're doing complex stuff like these little ears, you can group those in your drawing view. So I just Control G or right click, come down here to group, and then you can group it and see your hotkey there. That's a good one to memorize. And then ungroup is Control Shift G, or you can hit that here. So that's one of the things often we see baby animators who are animating a rig like this, and then they'll grab the ear because they need to redraw it for some reason, or the eye, and it's grouped. And then they'll struggle to try and get things to work because they don't realize you can ungroup that and then select things independently. So here they want to change the earring or put it on a separate layer because it wasn't rigged that way, and then they end up cutting it out, and it's just grouped. So Control Shift G, ungroup, and then you can select your pieces and change the perspective, whatever you need it to do. Legs, whether it's vector or digital, you can just copy, paste, and flip. You don't need to make two legs. These arms, I'm not going to clean up the same arm several times, especially since I know when I'm rotating it, I'm going to keep it as similar as I can to make sure that it's rotating properly. So if you're designing arms, like make one, copy, paste, flip, now you've got a second arm. Don't draw two arms if you don't have to. Obviously, if you're doing blue sky design, you're trying to come up with the character in the first place, do not delete your character. If you're trying to come up with designs, you don't want to do this really rigid stuff where you're copy, pasting, flip, and being really methodical. But if you're doing something like an orthographic rotation where things need to be really tight, then don't waste your time doing something twice. Don't draw two eyes and try and make them identical. If you need them to be actually identical, copy, paste, flip. And I don't think by default flipping drawings is set to any hotkey. I've gone in and changed the hotkeys there. This is something I do all the time. And I've just used the 4 and 5 keys. So it's either that 4 and 5 flip for animation or 4 and 5 flip for the drawings, and I've made sure that both of them do that. So I've just shared the hotkey. So now whether I'm flipping drawings or I'm animating something, 4 and 5 flip. So that was a big ramble. I didn't make any notes. Like I said, I've been super busy getting this character all dolled up and ready to rig. So I'm hoping by next week I'll be able to start rigging her in Gusto. But even if I don't have the hair and feet done, I can still start rigging the face and things like that. So that's not a huge deal. I've also been working on my storyboards a little bit. Those are still a long ways away, but things are happening for the short film. I'm doing a thing! So I think for my next video, I'm going to start the rigging process of this character, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll see where we are and how much time I find in my life to get that done. But if there's any questions about this stuff, character rotations, that you'd like help with, please leave them down below. I know this was kind of a shotgun collection of things that just came off the top of my head. I'm strapped for time, you guys. But thanks for dropping by. Good stamina if you stuck it out this far. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do. And I will see you in the next video.